They said the city belonged to the mayor. But everyone who mattered knew the truth. It belonged to Dominic Moretti. His name wasn't printed in newspapers. It wasn't carved into buildings. But it lived in whispers, in courtroom hallways, police precincts, shipping docks, and funeral homes. Where others saw laws, Dominic saw leverage. Where others saw borders, he saw routes. Where others saw men, he saw pressure points. For 25 years, Dominic ruled the underworld without ever needing a throne. And yet, there was one thing he could never control. His blood. The boy was 7 years old. Small for his age. Quiet. Too quiet for the son of a man whose enemies feared even breathing near his shadow. His name was Luca, the last living thread in the Moretti bloodline. The only future of an empire built on silence, strategy, and bodies buried too deep to surface. And Luca was disappearing. Not suddenly. Not violently. Slowly. So slowly that no one noticed at first. It started with weight. A few pounds. Then a few more. His suits had to be tailored again. Then again. Then again. His cheeks hollowed. His arms thinned. His eyes, once restless and curious, dulled into something distant, like a candle burning through fog. Doctors blamed growth spurts. Just genetics. Dominic accepted none of it. Because Dominic Moretti had survived 3 assassination attempts, 2 internal coups, and 1 war between 5 crime families, and the one lesson he'd learned was this. Nothing that weakens you is ever accidental. Luca lived inside a private wing of St. Aurelius Medical Center, an entire floor locked down by biometric access, surveillance cameras, and men who had killed without ever raising their voices. The hospital staff thought they were protecting a rich patient. They weren't. They were protecting the future of an empire. And yet, despite all that security, the boy kept fading. Every morning Dominic stood at the glass wall overlooking the city skyline, his reflection dark against the sunrise, and listened to the same words from the same doctors. His vitals are stable. Tests are normal. There's no sign of infection. There's no explanation. No explanation. Dominic hated that phrase. It was the kind of phrase men used when they were either lying or afraid. He watched Luca sleep, ribs faintly visible beneath pale skin, breathing shallow but steady. Machines hummed softly, measuring life in numbers. Dominic had buried men who screamed louder than those machines. And yet this silence unsettled him more than any gunshot ever had. "What aren't you telling me?" Dominic asked one evening. The doctor swallowed. "There's nothing to tell." Dominic didn't blink. "Then explain why my son is losing weight while you keep gaining excuses." The doctor's hands trembled slightly. But his answer stayed the same. That was when Dominic stopped trusting the hospital. And started watching the people inside it. He doubled the security. Every nurse background checked. Every doctor traced. Every cleaner monitored. Conversations recorded. Cameras added where cameras already existed. Still, nothing changed. Luca kept fading. And worse, he never complained. No pain. No nausea. No fever. Just exhaustion. Like something was draining him quietly from the inside. Dominic noticed it in the boy's eyes first. They no longer followed the movement of people in the room. They followed the ceiling. The lights. Shadows that weren't there. "Does anything hurt?" Dominic asked one night, sitting beside the bed. Luca shook his head weakly. "Do you feel sick?" Another shake. "Then why are you so tired?" Luca hesitated. "I don't know," he whispered. "I just feel smaller." Dominic froze. Smaller. That word hit harder than any diagnosis. Because men didn't just grow smaller. They were made smaller. Outside that hospital room, power was shifting. Word travels fast in the underworld, especially when bloodlines weaken. Rivals began circling. Old enemies resurfaced. Deals grew bolder. Boundaries were tested. Men who once lowered their eyes when Dominic entered a room now met his stare for a second longer. That second was dangerous. And Dominic noticed. He'd built his empire on 2 things, fear and certainty. Fear of what he could do. Certainty that he would survive. But what happens when the man who controls everything can't protect his own son? Power doesn't disappear overnight. It leaks. And leaks attract predators. Dominic began waking at 3:17 every morning. Always the same minute. Always with the same thought. Someone is touching my family. He reviewed hospital footage himself. Hours of silent hallways. Nurses passing. Doctors entering and exiting. Nothing abnormal. No altered medications. No suspicious visitors. No unauthorized access. But something wasn't right. He felt it the way soldiers feel an ambush before the gunshots start. One night, he noticed something small. So small no one else would have seen it. Luca's foreline had been changed. Not unusual. But the chart said it hadn't. Dominic asked the nurse. She said she hadn't touched it. He asked another. Same answer. The doctor said it must have been adjusted during routine maintenance. Routine maintenance on a private wing guarded by armed men. Dominic said nothing. But that night he placed one of his own men inside the hospital, disguised as a maintenance worker, and ordered him to watch everything. Especially the boy. 2 days later, the man vanished. No camera footage. No exit logs. No sign he'd ever been there. St. Aurelius Medical Center had just swallowed a ghost. And Luca kept shrinking. Dominic stopped sleeping. He stopped eating. He started carrying a gun again, something he hadn't done in years. Not because he feared enemies. Because he feared betrayal. The worst kind of enemy is the one already inside your walls. Doctors insisted nothing was wrong. But Dominic noticed something else. On the days certain staff worked, Luca seemed weaker. On the days they were gone, he seemed slightly better. Not healed. Not improving. But slower to fade. Like whatever was draining him had paused. That was when Dominic realized the truth he'd been avoiding. This wasn't illness. This was interference. Someone was doing something. Not enough to kill. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough to weaken. To delay. To buy time. Time for what? Dominic stood at the hospital window, the city glowing beneath him, and felt something he hadn't felt since he was a teenager running packages for men who'd later end up in rivers. Not for himself. For the future. Because if Luca died, there would be no heir. No successor. No bloodline. Just chaos. And chaos always invites war. Behind closed doors, the Underworld was already preparing for a world without Dominic Moretti. They just didn't know yet that Dominic had begun preparing for war too. And somewhere inside St. Aurelius Medical Center, someone was quietly watching the boy fade. Waiting. Calculating. Smiling. Because the most dangerous way to destroy a king isn't to kill him. It's to erase his future.
Most people believed power lived in boardrooms, courtrooms, or behind bulletproof glass. They were wrong. Power lived in places no one noticed. In hospital hallways at 3 a.m., in medication trays, in files no one bothered to read twice. And that's where Elena Cruz worked. She wasn't famous. She wasn't wealthy. She wasn't important. At least not on paper. She was a night shift nurse at St. Aurelius Medical Center, trained to survive on coffee, silence, and the quiet suffering of strangers. She had no idea she was about to step into the center of a war. It started with a weight chart. Not dramatic. Not alarming. Just wrong. Elena had been assigned to the private wing only twice before, both short rotations, both tightly controlled, both wrapped in enough security to make her uncomfortable. Armed guards. Restricted doors. A child's room that felt more like a fortress than a hospital. This time, she was assigned for a full week. The boy's name was Luca. He was 7. And according to his chart, he'd lost 9 pounds in 2 months. 9 pounds didn't sound like much until you saw him. Elena saw it immediately. The hollowness under his eyes. The fragile way his hospital gown hung from his shoulders. The way his breathing felt shallower than it should have. But the chart said his vitals were normal. His labs were clean. His appetite was moderate. None of that matched what Elena saw standing at his bedside. She checked his foreline, then his medication dosages, then his nutrition orders. Everything was technically correct, which made it worse. Because sometimes the most dangerous lies are the ones that look perfect. Lucas smiled when she introduced herself. A soft, polite smile, the kind children use when they've learned adults prefer silence over honesty. "Does anything hurt?" she asked gently. He shook his head. "Do you feel sick?" Another shake. "Then why are you here?" He hesitated, then whispered, "I don't know." That answer stayed with her long after her shift ended. On her third night, Elena noticed something else. Lucas' chart had been updated. Not by a doctor. By someone using a physician-level login. That wasn't unusual in high-security wings, except the update timestamp didn't match any doctor's rounds. And the changes were subtle. Not dramatic enough to raise alarms. Just enough to adjust baselines. Lower weight tolerances. Wider symptom ranges. Small edits. Invisible edits. The kind meant to make decline look normal. Elena stared at the screen longer than she should have. Then she did something she wasn't supposed to. She pulled the backup file. And there it was. 2 versions of the same chart. One showing steady decline. One disguising it. Her heart started beating faster. Not because she understood what it meant, but because someone with high-level access was manipulating a child's medical records. And that was never harmless. She began paying attention. Not to Luca. To the people around him. The doctors were careful. Polished. Controlled. But certain nurses, ones who rotated in and out inconsistently, behaved differently. They avoided eye contact. Moved too quietly. Asked fewer questions than professionals usually did. One nurse in particular stood out. Tall. Blonde. Never smiled. Always requested Luca's room during the same hours. Elena noticed that on the nights this nurse worked, Lucas seemed worse. Not dramatically, but noticeably. More exhausted. Less responsive. Like someone had dimmed the lights inside him. Elena mentioned it casually during shift change. "Oh, he's just tired," someone said. "Growth spurt," another replied. But no one checked. No one documented. No one cared. And that scared her more than if they had. On the 5th night, Elena stayed late. She pretended to finish paperwork. Waited. Watched. At 2:41 a.m., the blonde nurse entered Luca's room. At 2:49 a.m., she left. 8 minutes. Elena reviewed the chart. No medication was logged. No vitals taken. No procedures documented. Just 8 minutes of silence. Elena felt something cold settle into her chest. She checked the medication inventory. Nothing missing. She checked for flow rates. Normal. She checked nutritional intake. Logged correctly. And yet, Luca's blood pressure dropped slightly 30 minutes later. Not dangerously, but enough to notice. Enough to repeat. Enough to suggest a pattern. Elena began keeping her own notes. Off the system. Handwritten. Times. Faces. Room entries. Subtle shifts in Luca's vitals. And the pattern became undeniable. Every time that nurse visited, Luca declined. Not enough to alarm. Just enough to weaken. Elena tried to escalate it. She brought it to a supervisor. Was told to stop speculating. She brought it to a doctor. Was told the boy's condition was complex. She brought it to administration. Was told she was overstepping. That was when she realized something terrifying. They weren't dismissing her. They were avoiding her. And there's a difference. Dismissal means disbelief. Avoidance means fear. The next morning, Elena returned to work and found her name missing from the private wing rotation. No explanation. No notice. Just gone. She confronted the scheduler. It was requested, the woman said quietly. By who? I don't know. That was a lie. But it was the kind of lie people tell when the truth feels dangerous. Elena drove home that morning with her hands shaking on the steering wheel. She couldn't stop thinking about Luca's eyes. Not sad. Not scared. Just tired. Like someone who didn't understand why he was losing a fight he never agreed to. That night, Elena did something reckless. She returned to the hospital. Not as staff. As a visitor. She wore street clothes. Covered her badge. Walked in through the main entrance instead of staff access. Security eyed her, but let her through. Inside, she waited near the elevators that led to the private wing. At 1:17 a.m., the blonde nurse arrived. Not in uniform, in civilian clothes. And instead of using the staff elevators, she entered through the restricted corridor, using biometric access. Elena's breath caught. That corridor was supposed to be sealed to anyone not assigned to the wing. Yet this woman walked through like she owned it. Elena followed at a distance. Down 2 halls. Past locked doors. Past armed guards who nodded as the woman passed. Then the woman entered Luca's room. And this time, she stayed longer. 12 minutes. 14. 17. Elena stood outside, heart pounding, ears straining for sound. Nothing. No alarms. No voices. Just silence. When the door finally opened, the nurse didn't see Elena at first. But when she did, her expression didn't change. Not surprise. Not confusion. Recognition. Like she'd expected this moment. "Can I help you?" the woman asked calmly. Elena swallowed. "I think you're hurting that boy." The woman smiled faintly. A sad smile. "No," she said softly. "I'm saving something much bigger." Before Elena could respond, 2 security guards appeared behind her. Not hospital security. Private. Unmarked. One grabbed her arm. Hard. "Wrong hallway," the woman said, already walking away. She got lost. Elena was escorted out. Not arrested. Not warned. Just removed. Like an inconvenience. But as one guard pushed her toward the exit, he whispered something that made her blood run cold. "Stop digging," he said. "People disappear for less." That night, Elena checked her voicemail. 3 messages were gone. Her email password didn't work. Her staff ID was deactivated. Someone had erased her from the hospital. And that's when she understood the truth. Luca wasn't sick. He was being controlled. Not to kill him. Not yet. But to weaken him. To delay him. To buy time. Time for something that scared powerful people enough to rewrite medical records, manipulate hospital access, and threaten a nurse into silence. Elena stood alone in her apartment, staring at the city lights through her window, realizing something she'd never wanted to know. She was no longer just a nurse. She was a liability. And somewhere inside St. Aurelius Medical Center, someone was still walking into a child's room at night, smiling, waiting. Because whatever was coming next was bigger than illness, bigger than medicine, and far more dangerous than death. Dominic Moretti had survived wars. He'd buried rivals in rivers. He'd dismantled families without firing a single shot. He'd outlived men who swore they'd watch him die screaming. But nothing prepared him for the kind of fear that creeps in quietly, the kind that doesn't kick down doors or leave bodies behind. The kind that hides behind smiles and wears loyalty like a disguise. The moment Elena Cruz vanished from St. Aurelius Medical Center, Dominic knew something had gone terribly wrong. Not because he knew her name, but because one of his men, the one he'd planted inside the hospital disguised as maintenance, never came back either. 2 ghosts. Same building. Same week. That wasn't coincidence. That was cleanup. Dominic stood alone in his office overlooking the harbor, hands resting on the cold glass, watching cargo ships slide silently through fog. Every container out there belonged to someone. Every route had a price. Every port official had a weakness. He controlled all of it. Yet someone had just erased 2 people from a building he believed he owned. And that meant one thing. The threat wasn't outside his empire. It was inside it. He summoned his inner circle. Not publicly. Quietly. No phones. No guards. No witnesses. Just 6 men who had helped build his empire. Men who'd eaten at his table, buried his enemies, and sworn loyalty in blood. First was Marco Valeni, his consigliere, smooth, patient, always 2 steps ahead. Second was Rafael Cortez, his logistics chief, ports, routes, shipments. Third was Salvatore Rizzo, his childhood friend, muscle and enforcement. Fourth was Victor Hale, his financial architect, laundering, shell corporations' offshore vaults. Fifth was Leonard Graves, an outsider, former intelligence contractor who handled surveillance and counter-threats. And sixth was Dominic's younger brother, Anthony Moretti. The room was quiet when they arrived. Too quiet. Dominic didn't sit. He paced. "My son is dying," he said calmly. "And someone inside this room knows why." No one spoke. No one blinked. Not even Anthony. Dominic studied their faces the way he studied enemies. Microexpressions, breathing patterns, posture shifts. Lies always showed themselves to men who'd learned how to watch death long enough. "I planted a man in St. Aurelius," Dominic continued. "He disappeared." Still silence. "I sent another to observe medical staff," Dominic said. "She disappeared." Marco frowned slightly. "You're saying the hospital is compromised?" "No," Dominic said coldly. "I'm saying my empire is." That was when Anthony finally spoke. "You think one of us is behind this?" Dominic turned to him slowly. "I think someone is buying time," he said. "And time is only valuable when something is coming." No one disagreed. But disagreement wasn't the danger. Agreement was. Because traitors never defend themselves. They align. Dominic dismissed the meeting. But the war had begun. Quietly, he ordered surveillance on everyone, including himself. Phones tapped. Cars tracked. Accounts monitored. He didn't tell anyone. Not even Luca's doctors. Because the truth was brutal. If someone inside his circle was trying to erase his heir, then the child wasn't the target. The throne was. And thrones only fall when insiders push. Meanwhile, Elena Cruz was discovering what it meant to be hunted by people who didn't want her dead. They wanted her erased. Her bank card stopped working. Her phone service dropped. Her landlord received an anonymous complaint. Her nursing license was flagged under review. None of it official. None of it violent. Just pressure. Systematic. Precise. The kind used by organizations that don't want attention, just obedience. Elena knew she couldn't go to police. She knew she couldn't go to the hospital. And she knew one more thing. Whoever was hurting Luca had resources far beyond medicine. So she did the only reckless thing left. She followed the power. She researched Luca's family. Not the public records. The buried ones. Charity foundations. Shell companies. Construction firms tied to port logistics. Real estate projects built where crime syndicates once operated. The name Moretti surfaced everywhere. And suddenly everything made sense. Luca wasn't a patient. He was a succession problem. Meanwhile, Dominic's paranoia deepened. One of his offshore accounts, a dormant emergency fund, was accessed. Not stolen. Just tested. Someone wanted to know if it was still there. 2 of his shipping routes were flagged by customs in different countries on the same day. Not seized. Just delayed. Like someone was poking holes in the machine, not enough to break it, just enough to measure reaction. Then came the funeral. Salvatore Rizzo's cousin died in a car accident. Dominic attended, not out of obligation, but observation. Funerals revealed things. Who stood with who? Who whispered to who avoided eye contact. And that's when Dominic saw something he hadn't seen in years. Anthony, his brother, standing beside Marco Valeni. Not speaking. Not touching. Just aligned. Like chess pieces positioned for a move that hadn't happened yet. Dominic didn't confront them. Confrontation was for certainty. He needed proof. So he baited the trap. He leaked false information. Told Rafael Cortez, and only Rafael, that Luca's condition had stabilized. Told Victor Hale, and only Victor, that a medical specialist from Zurich was being flown in. Told Marco Valeni, and only Marco, that he was preparing to name Anthony as interim successor. 3 lies. 3 different targets. Within 48 hours, Luca's condition worsened dramatically. Not medically. Systematically. His appetite collapsed. His energy vanished. His vitals dropped. Just enough to alarm. Just enough to signal something had changed. Someone had accelerated. Dominic watched the monitors as doctors scrambled. He felt something break inside him. Not emotionally. Strategically. Because only one thing explained this. The people who needed Luca weak had just heard something they didn't like, which meant one of his inner circle had reached into that hospital. The Empire wasn't under attack. It was cannibalizing itself. Meanwhile, Elena discovered something terrifying. One of the shell companies tied to St. Aurelius Medical Center's equipment suppliers belonged to a financial group registered offshore. And that offshore group was tied to Victor Hale, Dominic's financial architect. She didn't know his name, but she knew what the connection meant. Someone close to power had influence over the hospital's supply chain, which meant medications. For solutions, equipment, access, everything. Elena tried to back up her files. Her laptop crashed. She tried cloud storage. Locked. Her apartment door was scratched the next morning. Not broken into. Scratched. A message. You're being watched. Dominic, meanwhile, ordered a silent internal audit, not financial. Loyalty. Every favor owed. Every debt unpaid. Every secret buried. And the deeper he dug, the more one truth emerged. Every possible suspect had motive. Marco wanted stability. Anthony wanted legacy. Victor wanted permanence. Raphael wanted power. Salvatore wanted respect. Everyone wanted the throne. But no one wanted to be seen reaching for it, which made the plan brilliant. No assassination. No poison. No scandal. Just a child slowly fading, until the Empire collapsed naturally. No blood. No blame. Just inevitability. And that's when Dominic realized the most terrifying truth of all. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't emotion. This was strategy. Someone was rewriting the future quietly, the way empires fall when no one is watching. That night, Dominic sat beside Luca's bed, listening to the steady beep of machines. "Someone's trying to take your life," he whispered. "But they're really trying to take mine." Luca didn't respond. He was too tired, too weak. And Dominic felt something he hadn't felt since he was a teenager standing over his first body. Helplessness. Not because he lacked power, but because power meant nothing when you didn't know who your enemy was. Across the city, Elena Cruz sat in the dark, staring at encrypted files she'd managed to save before everything crashed. Names, transactions, supply chains, connections between hospitals and offshore accounts, and one phrase repeated across multiple documents: succession contingency. Not illness, not care, not medicine. Succession. She finally understood. This wasn't about killing a child. It was about erasing a future. And someone inside Dominic Moretti's empire was preparing to rule what remained. Some secrets don't explode. They bleed. Slowly. Quietly. Invisibly. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, the damage is already permanent. Elena Cruz learned that the hard way. She hadn't slept in 30 hours. Her apartment lights stayed off. Curtains drawn. Laptop balanced on her knees as encrypted files glowed faintly in the dark. Every document she'd saved before her system crashed was incomplete. Fragments of invoices, supplier codes, offshore transfers, medical equipment contracts routed through shell corporations with names designed to mean nothing. But together, they told a story. Not about illness. Not about medicine. About control. Every supplier linked back to the same offshore entity. Every nutritional compound used in Luca's ward traced to the same distributor. Even the biometric access system for the private wing had been serviced by a company with no employees, just a mailbox in another country. None of it illegal. None of it obvious. All of it deliberate. Elena realized then what no doctor had. Luca wasn't being poisoned. He was being regulated. His intake wasn't wrong. His treatment wasn't dangerous. It was calculated, designed to keep him alive while quietly weakening him. Enough to stall growth. Enough to slow development. Enough to delay inheritance. Someone wasn't trying to kill him. They were trying to pause him. Freeze time. Because in the Underworld, time was everything. Meanwhile, Dominic Moretti was reaching the same conclusion from the opposite side of power. He stood in his surveillance room. Walls covered in screens showing ports, streets, offices, bank vaults, and hospital hallways. His empire mapped in moving pixels. and one screen showed Luca.
Small, pale, still.
Dominic watched doctors adjust machines while knowing the machines weren't the enemy. This wasn't medicine. This was engineering. He ordered his intelligence chief, Leonard Graves, to isolate hospital supply chains, not the staff. The supplies. Within hours, Graves found anomalies. Not fraud. Not sabotage. Patterns. Specific 4 formulas delivered only to Luca's floor. Specialized nutrition compounds used only in one wing. Medical vendors routed through shell companies registered under holding groups that vanished 6 months ago. Someone had rewritten the boys' treatment at the infrastructure level. And infrastructure meant one thing. Money. Dominic summoned Victor Hale, his financial architect. The man who made money disappear and reappear clean. The man whose fingerprints were on half the offshore world. Victor entered calmly. As always. Confident. Relaxed. Unafraid. That was the problem. Talk to me about Metasource Logistics, Dominic said casually. Victor didn't blink. A mid-tier medical supplier, he replied. Why? Because every compound touching my son routes through them. Victor tilted his head. Coincidence. Dominic smiled faintly. There's no such thing. Victor shrugged. Hospitals outsource. Supply chains overlap. Dominic nodded. Then explain why Metasource is owned by a shell group registered under Helios Holdings. Victor's jaw tightened, barely. Helios is diversified, he said carefully. They own hundreds of subsidiaries. And Helios is indirectly owned by you, Dominic said softly. The room went quiet. Victor exhaled slowly. You're reaching. Dominic leaned forward. I buried a man for less than a lie, he said calmly. And you just gave me one. Victor's eyes hardened. You think I'd hurt your child? No, Dominic replied. I think you'd hurt my future. Victor stood straighter. This empire needs stability, he said. And stability requires predictability. Explain. Victor hesitated, and that hesitation was the confession. Your son is a child, Victor said finally. Too young to lead. Too young to inherit. Too young to command loyalty. If something happened to you tomorrow, the empire would fracture. Blood would flood the streets. So you weakened him? Dominic said. No, Victor snapped. I protected him. Dominic's smile vanished. You regulated him, Victor continued. Slowed his development. Bought time. Time to prepare the organization for a smooth transition. Time to consolidate power. Time to avoid civil war. You poisoned a child, Dominic said. I saved an empire, Victor replied coldly. And that's when Dominic understood the genius of the plan. No assassinations. No coups. No overt betrayal. Just a slow manipulation of biology to delay succession indefinitely, keeping Luca alive but weak, present but powerless, until the organization accepted someone else at the top. No murder. No scandal. Just inevitability. Victor thought he'd built a perfect crime. But he hadn't considered one thing. Elena Cruz. Across the city, Elena discovered something even darker. One of the compounds delivered to Luca's ward wasn't approved for pediatric use, not because it was toxic, but because it suppressed metabolic growth under long-term exposure. Not fatal. Not detectable. Just limiting. She cross-referenced the dosage levels. Then Luca's weight charts. Then the altered baselines. It all aligned too perfectly to be coincidence. She had proof. Real proof. Not suspicion. Not pattern recognition. Evidence. The kind that could destroy careers. Or end lives. Elena tried to back everything up again. Her power cut. She grabbed her phone. No signal. Then came the knock. 3 slow taps. Deliberate. Controlled. She didn't answer. The knob turned. Locked. But pressure followed. Not forcing entry. Testing resistance. Elena's heart pounded as footsteps retreated. Moments later, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text message. Stop digging. This is your final warning. She realized then that she wasn't being threatened. She was being managed. Just like Luca. And management always escalates when control slips. Elena made a decision.
She wouldn't go to police.
She wouldn't go to media. She would go to the only person powerful enough to survive the truth. Dominic Moretti. She encrypted her files, split them into fragments, uploaded pieces to offshore servers, then wrote one message. Your son isn't sick. He's being regulated.
I know how.
I know who. Meet me alone. She sent it through 3 dead channels. And waited. Meanwhile, Dominic didn't kill Victor. Not yet. Because killing him would prove guilt. And Dominic didn't want guilt. He wanted the entire web. He wanted every collaborator, every supplier, every beneficiary, every contingency. He wanted to burn the system, not the man. So he let Victor walk. But he watched him. And Victor did what traitors always do when they believe they've survived. He moved. He contacted offshore partners, triggered emergency transfers, activated fallback plans. And every move he made, Dominic recorded. Then Dominic received Elena's message. Not directly. Through 3 layers of dead drops. Encrypted. Anonymous. But undeniable. The details were too precise. Too informed. Too accurate to be guesswork. Someone had seen the machine from the inside. Someone knew about the compounds, the access routes, the manipulation. Someone had proof. Dominic felt something shift in his chest, not hope, alignment. Because for the first time, 2 sides of the truth had collided. The nurse and the king. And both now knew the same thing. This wasn't a conspiracy. It was policy. A succession strategy written in medicine instead of blood. Dominic responded with 1 word.
Where?
The reply came seconds later. Tomorrow. Midnight. Parking structure beneath St. Aurelius. Level 3.
Come alone.
Dominic stared at the message. Then at Luca through the glass wall. Then at the city beyond. And for the first time since this nightmare began, he felt something worse than fear. Urgency. Because someone wasn't just controlling his son. They were controlling time. And tomorrow night, someone was going to lose that control. Or lose their life. Power doesn't fall. It hesitates. And in that hesitation, empires collapse. Dominic Moretti arrived at the St. Aurelius parking structure at 11:57 p.m. No entourage. No bodyguards. No armored convoy. Just a black sedan, a loaded pistol in the glove compartment, and the weight of an empire pressing down on his chest. Level 3 was nearly empty. Concrete pillars. Flickering lights. The low echo of distant engines from the street above. Every shadow felt like movement. Every sound felt like intention. At 11:59, he stepped out of the car. At midnight, Elena Cruz appeared. She walked fast, hood pulled low, eyes sharp with exhaustion and adrenaline. She didn't look like a nurse anymore. She looked like someone who'd learned how close truth can come to death. You came alone, she said.
So did you, Dominic replied.
That makes us both stupid. She handed him a flash drive. That's everything, she said. Supplier contracts. Compound breakdowns. Access logs. Altered charts. Shell company trails. Enough to destroy careers. Enough to end people. Dominic didn't take it yet. Why not go to police? Because police don't fight empires, Elena said. They get buried by them. And you think I won't bury you? I think you already would've, she said. If I was lying. Dominic studied her. She wasn't afraid. She was desperate. There's a difference. He took the drive. Start talking.
She did.
She explained the compounds. The metabolic suppression. The altered baselines. The biometric access routing. The way the plan wasn't to kill Luca, but to stall him until succession collapsed naturally. Someone wants him alive, she said. Just weak. Just delayed. Long enough for the Empire to accept someone else. Dominic's jaw tightened. Victor Hale, Elena said. Your financial architect. The shell companies lead back to him. Dominic didn't react. Because he already knew. But what she said next, he didn't. There's more, she whispered. Victor isn't alone. Dominic's eyes narrowed. He couldn't run something this complex without internal cover, she continued. Someone inside your inner circle is helping him, not financially, but operationally.
Who?
I don't know, Elena said. But the hospital access logs show overrides from 2 independent clearance chains.
2.
That meant 2 collaborators. 1 financial, 1 operational. And operational access inside Dominic's empire only belonged to 5 men. His inner circle, his family, his brother. Before Dominic could respond, Elena's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She froze. Then Dominic's did too. Same number.
Same time.
1 message. You shouldn't have met. The lights above them flickered. Then went dark. Emergency generators hummed faintly, but not enough to power the entire structure. Shadows swallowed the space. Footsteps echoed. Multiple. Moving fast. Run, Elena whispered. Dominic pulled her behind a concrete pillar as gunfire cracked through the garage. Not wild. Not chaotic. Professional. Suppressive fire. Meant to pin. Not kill.
Yet.
Dominic fired back twice, not to hit, but to shift angles. They moved.
Low. Fast.
Between parked cars. Concrete chipped. Sparks flew. This wasn't Victor, Elena gasped. This is someone else. Of course it is, Dominic replied. Victor's too clean for this. A bullet shattered a windshield inches from Elena's head. She screamed. Dominic grabbed her collar and dragged her behind a stairwell. Whoever sent them knows you're valuable, he said. Which means they don't want you dead. Then what do they want? She asked. He met her eyes. Control. Footsteps closed in. 3 silhouettes appeared at the garage entrance. Not armed guards. Not gangsters. Private contractors. Black uniforms. No insignias. No emotion. They weren't here to negotiate. Dominic fired again, hitting one in the shoulder. The man dropped but didn't scream. Didn't panic. Just retreated. Which told Dominic everything. These weren't assassins. They were a retrieval. Elena's phone buzzed again. Another message. Walk out alone. He lives. She stared at Dominic. He lives, she whispered.
They mean Luca, Dominic said.
Her blood ran cold. They're threatening your son. No, Dominic said. They're reminding me who they think controls him. Dominic checked his gun. 2 rounds left. No backup. No time. He made a decision. Give me your phone, he said.
She did.
He typed fast. Sent 1 message. If Luca's condition worsens, everyone dies. Including you. Then he handed the phone back. Stay here, he said. No, Elena said. I'm not leaving you. You already saved my son, he said. Now save yourself. He stepped into the open. Gun lowered. Hands visible. Come get me, he called into the dark. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then 1 man stepped forward.
Tall. Broad.
Masked. You shouldn't have met her, the man said. Dominic smiled faintly. You shouldn't have touched my child. The man tilted his head. He's alive. For now. That's enough. No, Dominic said. That's leverage. The man hesitated, just a fraction. And Dominic knew. They weren't in full control. Someone else was pulling strings. Someone who needed Luca alive. Someone who needed Dominic distracted. Someone who needed time. Suddenly, sirens wailed outside. Police. Ambulances. Traffic units. Elena had triggered the emergency call feature on her phone. The retrieval team retreated instantly, melting into stairwells and service corridors like ghosts.
Gone. Just like that.
The lights flickered back on. Concrete dust drifted through the air. Elena collapsed against the pillar, shaking. Dominic stood still, not relieved. Calculating. Because this wasn't over. This was confirmation. Someone had just authorized an armed response inside a public hospital structure, which meant they believed their position was strong enough to survive exposure. And that meant the conspiracy wasn't small. It wasn't Victor. It wasn't even 2 men. It was a faction. A faction inside Dominic's empire. and possibly inside institutions far beyond it. Dominic drove Elena home personally. No words, no music, just silence and headlights cutting through fog. Before she stepped out, he spoke. "You did the right thing." She looked at him. "I almost got you killed. You almost saved my son." Almost. Dominic's jaw tightened. "I don't know who else is involved," he said. "I don't know how deep it goes. I don't know how many people are touching his care." "Then what will you do?" she asked. Dominic looked straight ahead. "I'll burn the tree," he said, "until the roots scream." Back at St. Aurelius, Luca's heart rate spiked. Not from illness. From stress. Doctors scrambled. Machines beeped faster. A nurse noticed something strange. One of the compounds in Luca's 4 had been changed. Not increased. Not reduced. Removed. Someone had pulled the control. Not to help him,
but to test something.
Dominic received the alert on his phone. Then another message. Unknown number. Check his vitals. You're welcome. Dominic stared at the screen. Because whoever sent that wasn't helping. They were signaling. They were saying, "We can hurt him. We can heal him. We control the switch." And Dominic realized something horrifying. This wasn't a coup anymore. It was a negotiation. A silent war where Luca's body was the battlefield. Where loyalty meant nothing. Where blood meant leverage. Where the future of an empire hung not on bullets, but on biology. And somewhere inside Dominic's organization, someone was smiling. Because as long as Luca lived weak, the throne stayed empty. And an empty throne invites kings. Power never announces when it's about to fall. It waits. And then it lets gravity finish the job. Dominic Moretti didn't sleep the night after the parking garage attack. He sat in the dark beside Luca's hospital bed, watching machines breathe for his son, while an empire breathed down his neck. The boy's chest rose and fell in shallow rhythm. His skin felt colder than it should have. His heartbeat too fast. Not dying, but not living either. Exactly as designed. Dominic finally understood the genius of the plan. Not assassination. Not poison. Not betrayal. Delay. Delay until the world moved on. Delay until loyalty shifted. Delay until someone else became inevitable. They weren't trying to kill his son. They were trying to make him irrelevant. Leonard Graves entered quietly. "I traced the access overrides," he said. 2 clearance chains, like the nurse said. 1 financial. 1 operational. "Who?" Dominic asked. Graves hesitated. "That's the problem," he said. "The operational chain doesn't belong to any of your men." Dominic turned. "Explain." "It belongs to your brother." The room went silent. Not heavy. Not shocked. Empty. Because Dominic had already suspected. Anthony Moretti wasn't reckless. He wasn't violent. He wasn't ambitious in the obvious ways. He was patient, thoughtful, loyal-looking, which made him dangerous. "How long?" Dominic asked. "Years," Graves said. "Before Luca was born." Dominic exhaled slowly. His brother hadn't moved against him. He'd moved around him, built contingency networks, established quiet alliances, positioned himself as the only stable alternative in case Dominic ever fell. But Anthony had never planned to kill his nephew. He'd planned to outweight him. Dominic stared at Luca's sleeping face. "How do I stop it?" he asked. Graves hesitated again. "You can't," he said. "Not cleanly. Not legally. Not quietly." Dominic nodded. "Then we won't do it quietly." The confrontation. Anthony agreed to meet. Private. No guards. No witnesses. No weapons. Just 2 brothers in the cathedral-sized wine cellar beneath the Moretti estate, where their father once taught them the difference between power and fear. Anthony poured 2 glasses. "You look tired," he said. "I look betrayed," Dominic replied. Anthony didn't deny it. "Luca's not dying," Anthony said calmly. "That's the part you should focus on. You touched my son." "I stabilized your empire," Anthony replied. "You built a machine. Machines need continuity. Children don't provide continuity." "He's 7. He's irrelevant," Anthony said. "Right now." Dominic stared at him. You regulated his body. I regulated time, Anthony said. There's a difference. Victor Hale, Dominic said. Anthony nodded. He designed the infrastructure. I designed the patients. And the hospital? Dominic asked. An asset, Anthony replied. Like ports, like banks, like courts. You turned my child into a lever. Anthony met his eyes. I turned him into insurance. Dominic's voice dropped. You turned him into a hostage. Anthony exhaled slowly. You're emotional, he said. That's why you can't see it. If something happened to you tomorrow, this empire would tear itself apart. Luca wouldn't survive it. I ensured he wouldn't be dragged into chaos. By weakening him. By protecting him, Anthony said. By keeping him alive until the world was ready for him. Dominic laughed once. Cold. You don't get to decide when my son becomes a man. Anthony stepped closer. You're not immortal, he said. And neither is power. No, Dominic replied. But blood is. Anthony's jaw tightened. You can't expose me, he said. Not without destroying everything you built. Watch me. Anthony smiled faintly. You won't. Dominic didn't answer. Because the truth was, Anthony was right. Exposing him publicly would fracture the empire instantly. War. Blood. Chaos. Thousands dead. Luca wouldn't survive that either. This wasn't a legal battle. It was a strategic one. And strategy meant sacrifice. The switch. Dominic didn't kill Victor Hale. Didn't arrest him. Didn't expose him. He did something worse. He froze him. Every account Victor controlled was locked. Every route he oversaw was rerouted. Every partner he relied on was quietly warned off. Victor woke up one morning to find himself alive, but powerless, invisible, irrelevant. Then Dominic did something no one expected. He removed Anthony from operational control. Not publicly. Not violently. Just subtly. Meetings stopped including him. Decisions stopped routing through him. Contracts stopped carrying his signature. Security clearance access expired. Overnight, Anthony became what he feared most. A spectator. But Dominic still hadn't solved the real problem. Luca. That solution came from Elena. She discovered something Victor hadn't accounted for. The compound suppressing Luca's metabolism didn't require withdrawal. It required replacement. A specific amino catalyst, harmless in normal use, could reverse the suppression gradually without triggering system alarms. Dominic authorized it immediately. Quietly. No hospital announcement. No medical documentation. No staff changes. Just one compound added to 1,4 bag. The effect wasn't instant, but it was real. Within 48 hours, Luca's appetite returned. Within 72, his pulse stabilized. Within 5 days, he slept without machines. For the first time in months, he laughed. Dominic heard it from a hallway, and something inside him collapsed. Not relief. Release. The cost. Anthony noticed. Not through reports. Through instinct. He confronted Dominic again. You changed something, he said. His vitals shifted. Yes. You broke the equilibrium. I broke your leash. Anthony's eyes hardened. You've destabilized succession. No, Dominic replied. I've restored it. You can't kill me, Anthony said. You won't. Dominic leaned closer. No, he said. I'll let you live. Anthony frowned. Why? Because you'll watch, Dominic said. Every day. As he grows. As he thrives. As he becomes everything you tried to delay. Anthony laughed. You think I'll just accept this? No, Dominic said. I think you'll try something. Anthony smiled faintly. Good. Good, Dominic agreed. Because now I'll be ready. Anthony left. Alive. Unbroken. But defeated. Which made him dangerous. But no longer invisible. The final reckoning. Weeks passed. Luca gained weight. Strength. Color. His eyes sharpened. His voice grew louder. His laugh grew fearless. Doctors called it recovery. Dominic called it war. Because power doesn't forgive humiliation. And Anthony wasn't done. Dominic intercepted communications, Anthony attempting to activate fallback networks Victor had built. Dominic allowed it. Then traced every contact, every financier, every fixer, every supplier. He didn't kill them. He didn't arrest them. He isolated them, cut their access, destroyed their leverage. One by one, Anthony's shadow network collapsed. Not loudly, quietly, like oxygen being removed from a room. Until Anthony finally understood. He hadn't lost. He'd been outgrown. Anthony confronted Dominic one last time. You turned this into something worse than death, he said. You erased me. Dominic met his eyes.
No, he said.
You erased yourself. Anthony laughed bitterly. I did what I had to do. No, Dominic replied. You did what you wanted. Silence followed. Then Anthony asked the question he'd been avoiding. What happens now? Dominic answered honestly. You live, he said. Without power. Without access. Without leverage. And you get to watch the future you tried to delay become inevitable. Anthony swallowed. You're cruel. Dominic nodded. I learned from you. The epilogue. Elena Cruz disappeared. Not violently. Not mysteriously. Intentionally. Dominic funded a new identity, a new career, a new city. Before she left, she visited Luca one last time. He was sitting up in bed, coloring. Are you a doctor? He asked. She smiled. No, she said. I just help people sometimes. He smiled back. Thank you. She didn't reply. Because some thank yous are too heavy to carry. Dominic watched from the hallway. You saved my son, he said quietly. No, Elena replied. I noticed him. Dominic nodded. That's rare. She left that night. And no one ever heard from her again. Not because she vanished. Because she was finally free. The final image. Years later, Luca stood on a balcony overlooking the harbor, taller than Dominic now.
Strong. Calm.
Watching the empire that once tried to erase him. Why did they try to hurt me? Luca asked quietly. Dominic didn't lie. They weren't trying to hurt you, he said. They were trying to control the future. And did they? Dominic looked at his son. Then at the city. Then at the water. No, he said. They taught me how dangerous patience can be. Luca nodded. Will it happen again? Always, Dominic replied. Power never stops reaching. What matters, Luca said, is who's watching. Dominic smiled. Because that was the moment he knew. The boy wasn't just alive. He was ready. And somewhere in the shadows of the city, men who once thought time belonged to them, now understood something far more terrifying. The future had survived. And it was watching back.